You're listening to Real Conversations with Jacob Young. Real Conversations is sponsored by Boys Town. Boys Town's been saving children and healing families for over 100 years. Please go to boystown.org to learn how you can donate to help girls and boys at Boys Town. Real Conversations is also sponsored by Lane Frost Brand, made for the champion in you. Everything from hats to hoodies, something for the whole family. And be sure to use Jacob15 to save on anything and everything. Lane Frost Brand. Now, my guest this week is an up-and-coming singer-songwriter who is literally taking Nashville and the music scene by storm. He's got a great Americana country rock sound and a soulful voice that sets him apart. He and his band, The Treatment, are regulars at Kid Rock's Honky Tonk in Nashville. He's been working with the likes of Zac Brown Band, Kid Rock, and in fact, he recorded an album at Kid Rock's studio, and some of his songs, including Nightlife and Loving Me, Loving You, are a few that have caught my attention and the attention of none other than Sony Music, who have recently signed him. He really was a child musical prodigy who has gone from humble beginnings to becoming a music star. My guest this week is the one and only, and one of my new favorite artists, Dean James. You know what time it is. It's time to keep it real with Real Conversations with Jacob Young. Dean, welcome.
Hey, brother.
Wow, man, you have incredible talent, incredible voice, but you also have an incredible story to tell. It's really a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, man. I'm glad to be here, brother.
Yeah, thank you. Your hometown of Canton, Ohio. It's most known for the Football Hall of Fame. I've had some football players on my podcast. My wife has family in Akron, so we're familiar with the area. Yeah. How did you get your start playing music in such a football town like Canton, Ohio?
My dad, he played and still does. But he really, I guess, from what I was told, I really gravitated towards it pretty early. I was like 2 or 3, and my mom and grandmother had told me, like, even when most like 2-year-olds are just their attention span is just out the window, kind of, and my dad would be playing guitar, and I would kind of crawl over there and pull myself up his leg and like watch his hands, like watch his left and right hands. And so I guess really since, I was old enough to really walk and stand on my own, I've been kind of infatuated with it. So it wasn't long after that, there's like home movies. I was like 4 years old, and I was playing the guitar on my own.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. It's true what they say a lot of times. Like my dad played harmonica. We didn't have a radio in the truck. This is early 80s, and my dad was always the guy. He would buy a new vehicle, save it forever, but he always would buy the most basic version of it. Like, who needs a radio? You don't need a radio. I got a harmonica. Well, it forced me to play the harmonica, so I ended up playing the harmonica at a young age because of that. Yeah. So. Like a lot of us, I read about, you grew up in hard times financially.
Yep.
How did you manage to keep the faith and positive outlook when things seemed maybe down and out?
It's tough because they're not like that anymore for me, obviously. But back then, my family, I had I got 3 younger sisters. And so when things were, super tough, we leaned on each other, pretty close, pretty hard. And there were times where, we had one bed in the house, and, I just, there's 4 kids in that, and we grew up sleeping in one bed. And so really, we grew up with no cable. So, a lot of the time, and no friends, and no this or this, because we moved around a lot. And, we relied on, being our creativity and playing games with each other. And really, and I was the oldest. So I felt like at a young age, I took on this parenting sort of role where I had to keep it together for them, because I just I didn't want them to, if I knew that, oh, well, the electric's going to get shut off, or this is happening, or that's happening, with the adults, I'm, 11 or 12. I didn't want them to know.
Yeah, that's a tough spot to be in at such a young age, but
Mhm.
very honorable to be looking out for your sisters in that way. And what kind of things would you say or do to keep their minds off of it?
Um, I guess we would, I'm trying to think, it's been so long. I guess we would play music with each, I'd have them in there, like, putting on a, like a rock show, like this, like pretend, I remember now, like even at a young age, like I'd have my sister holding, we had one guitar in the house and it probably had 4 strings on it. And I'd have one sister like behind a bunch of pots and pans, and the other one like, you know, holding a broomstick or whatever. And I'd be like, stand like this, and be like putting on this makeshift, rock concert with them. And then I'd turn on like, on the radio, and we'd, act out what we're hearing on the radio, and things like that. There was a lot of imagination growing up when you don't have, you know, game systems, or this or this or that. And we did, obviously eventually, but there was a lot of imagination, growing up, and being creative with what you had around you.
Sure. And music can be very soothing,
Oh yeah.
especially in difficult times.
Hmm.
So that's cool that that was already in you, and you were already
Yeah.
soothing people with your sisters with music.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. Everyone agrees that you're a huge talent. Can you tell our listeners how you got your big break on Instagram?
Yeah, that's a hell of a story. At the time, I'd say 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. Yeah, it's hard to say, but um, I was at a pretty low point. I just got out of a relationship, and I found myself essentially like homeless. My mom had taken on like some bad health. She started having seizures, and her and my sisters were living in like a 2-bedroom apartment that I put in my name for them. Um, and the landlord there found out that I wasn't living there, and they evicted them, or they evicted me essentially. And I so I had that on me, and my mom, for the first time in her life, was truly like helpless. She's having seizures every day, and she had no medication. We didn't know what was happening. And I I was sleeping on another musician's couch, and I had, you know, just the occasional. It was hard to find music work in Canton, Ohio. Let's put it that way. It was very, very sparse. There's a handful of musicians there, but it was still hard to get steady work enough to pay bills and survive. And so I someone posted a video on Insta, or yeah, someone posted a video, and I got it from them, and I had just got on Instagram. I was so new to it, I didn't even really know what it was. And so I posted it, and I it was just me playing, singing, and I get a message from a guy named Robert Randolph. And Robert Randolph, I didn't even know who he was at the time, and he's like, "Hey man, you're really good. I'd like for you to come out and play some shows with us." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." I'm just like thinking it's just some random guy. I didn't know who he was. And one day, like a couple days later, maybe a week later, I look him up, and I realize that he's like on tour with like Dave Matthews and like the Allman Brothers, and he's voted like one of the top 50 greatest guitar players of all time. I'm just like,
How cool
oh
is that?
shit. Yeah, I was like, what the hell? And so I messaged him back. I'm like, hey man, sorry, I just got this, like, yeah, dude, I'd be really interested. What are you thinking? And he was like, well, I really like your style, and you know, I have a show, and maybe you can come out and play with us. I'm like, yeah, sure, let me know. And I waited and waited, and then finally he messaged me back and was like, yeah, it's in Telluride, Colorado. And it was some like Telluride. I didn't know. So they booked me a plane ticket. I never even been on a plane before. So they booked me up a flight. It's my first flight. I'm shitting my pants. I'm just like, so, I've never flown.
Yeah,
And I'm just like looking out the windows and stuff. I'm just like, man, I'm so nervous.
sure.
And he said, learn this record. He sent me a record and he said, learn it. I'm like, okay. So I sat and I learned it, learned all the vocal parts, all the guitar parts, because he was going to have me sing and play guitar. And I get there. There's a guy holding a sign with my name on it. I'm like, oh, damn. And they take me into the car from Denver up through the mountains to get to Telluride. And I get up there and I realize that there are like 5,000 people there. And it wasn't just this little gig, it was this huge festival. And up until that point, the biggest crowd I'd ever played in front of was probably like 500. So I went from 500 to 5,000. And
Let me ask you, were you more scared of the plane flight or playing in front of that big crowd?
the plane.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure, dude. I was like, I don't know why, but I was terrified. I just got like such anxiety. I grew up, idolizing Leonard Skinner and Stevie Ray Vaughan and all these guys where they all died in plane crashes and shit. So it just made me like, I was spooked a little bit, And so I get there and I asked the tour manager, and I'm like, hey man, where's the band? They were like, oh, they'll be here. And so I just walked around this huge festival, all these people, and then right around, there was no sound check. So like right around showtime, 7, 8, or 6 or whatever, I walk on stage and there's Robert and his band, and we meet for the first time on stage.
No rehearsal.
No rehearsal.
Not together.
Never met him. Mm-hmm. Never even spoke to him. Didn't even know what his voice sounded like. And I get out there, and Robert is an amazing musician, and his style is super, super awesome. He's very like gospel. He's a steel guitar player, and he is it's like this gospel rock funk thing. And I get up there, and I'd never been to church. I've never played any kind of gospel or really even funk. I played rock and country and some pop songs, whatever. And I get up there and I'm like, I am the only white guy here. It's Robert Randolph in the Family Band.
Yeah.
Robert's a black guy, his brother, his cousin, this or that. And so I'm just like, I feel like, oh, I'm going to blow this gig. Like, this is like, these guys are all family. They grew up playing with each other. They, like, culturally, I was like, I'm not a fit. I've never been to church, like, this isn't going to work for me, and we start playing, and I'm like, I don't know this song. This wasn't on the record he gave me. And I look back to the keyboard player. I'm like, what is this, man? And he's like, just keep going. I'm like, okay. And I just, play next song. We play an entire gig, and not one song was on the record he gave me.
No.
Like nothing.
So,
And
but
so
were
I'm
you
like,
singing too, or just playing at that point?
yeah, like I think he had me sing a couple covers like Superstitious
Yeah,
and some jammy. He's a very jam band kind of guy.
yeah.
Well,
Well, hence playing with like Dave Matthews and that sort of
yeah, yeah, it's
jive.
very
Yeah,
that thing. And so I I'm like, winding up my cables like I bombed this gig. Like this dude, like I didn't know any of these songs. I was just trying to hold on. And so we get off stage and he's just like we go and we eat the catering and things like that. And he didn't really say anything to me. And like really nobody said anything to me. No good job, no nothing. And then so I'm just like, oh, like I guess it is what it is.
mm,
And we're walking back to the hotel and he goes, Dean, he's like, brother, I think you got the gig, man. And I'm like, what? Like, no one spoke to me the past 2 hours. And so I I learned that day that my beginnings as a musician, because I learned in such a natural, almost as like a blind person would learn, and they have their way of learning and they have such a deep connection with music. I grew up so infatuated at such an early age that even though I didn't even know the songs that they were playing, I was able to jump right in and play with a tight band, family band,
yeah,
as if I've been a member all along,
yeah,
and that's what Robert was looking for. And
yeah.
so I was like, I got the gig. Like, well, what does that mean? And then he's like, oh, my tour manager will get with you. And so I fly back home, I get back on a plane, fly back home. And I'm like, I go back to my couch that I was laying on. I'm like, okay, here's reality. Like my sisters are, and I knew that in the music industry and in a lot of industries, people can be bullshitters, man. They can be like, they tell you and then tell you one thing and never follow through. And then, so I started like, a couple days go by, a week goes by. Next thing you know, this tour manager, he messages me and he says, hey, I emailed you Robert's calendar. Are you good for those dates? And like I pull up this email and I look at this calendar, man, and there is like 8 months solid of gigs across the country, cruises and Mexico and Canada. And like I was just like, what? I'm like, dude, because I mean, like my jaw was on the floor. And I'm like, I'm good for all of them. Like, when do we leave? Like, when can we leave? And I, I get essentially to the first couple gigs, and I learn how Robert does things, and I go out there and I do my thing, and I sing. He tells me what to sing, and we play the show, and it's my first time on a tour bus. Like my first time on a private plane, my first time, playing these audiences and these crowds. It was an experience that I'd never. It's like almost hard to describe. I wake up on a tour bus and I'm in a city that I've never been to before, and there's a tour manager that has a itinerary printed out, and he says, "Hey man, there's a restaurant over here, and there's a gym over there, and there's this, and then we eat at this time, and then we sound check at this time, and then we do this, and then we have a little meet and greet before, and then this is what time we got to go on stage." And I'm just like, oh damn, like I've made it. Like
Yeah. I was gonna
this is
say,
what
I
I've
mean, you
wanted
must
my
feel
whole
like you
life.
were living the dream.
I couldn't stop smiling. If someone gave me $1 million, I couldn't stop smiling at that time. I couldn't, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that it was real. And, I play the first couple gigs and I go back to my couch and, and my checks hadn't even cleared yet. And so while I was out there, I told Robert, you know, what was happening with me and my family. I said, I didn't say I was homeless or anything like that, but I said, what was happening with my mom and sisters, and they're about to get evicted. And my mom and them were like, what do we, you know, my sister's like, what are we going to do? You know, they were young at, you know, at the time. And I'm like, what are we going to do? You know, and like, and two of them didn't even know how to drive. You know, they were so young. And I was like, I don't know, but I got this gig now. And I told Robert about it. And he gave me, when I went back home, I got my direct deposit set up. And I looked in the account and I had a $5,000 advance.
Okay.
And I call the tour manager and I'm like, hey, how much do I get paid, dude? Like, what am I actually making here? And he told me, you know, you're making, you know, like 300 or 400 bucks a show. And I'm like, I have like $5,000 in my account. We only played a couple shows. He's like, yeah, Robert told me to give it to you. I'm like, well, why? And he's like, he said you needed, you know, to give you an advance to help your family. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me, dude.
Wow.
And I remember, this is a true story and it is insane. I remember flying back home. I'm on the plane and I land in Cleveland. And Cleveland was about an hour away from Canton.
Mhm.
And I get on Zillow or rent.com or whatever the hell. I'm looking, and I find something in between Canton and Cleveland in Akron.
Mhm.
And rent's like $1,200 a month. And I fill out the quick app and I say, hey, is this available? And they said, we can have a showing today at 2. And it's noon in Cleveland. So I'm like, I'll be there. I get off the plane, get an Uber to that house, and I sit there and I wait. They were already doing a showing
Mhm.
when I got there. They walk out of the place and I walk into it. It's a, you know, it was a nice like little 3-bedroom house, 2-car garage, and it was sitting on like a little acre of land. And it was great. It was nice. It was nice house. And I mean, I just looked in, looked, you know, I was like, I'm I want this house. And they were like, well, so do the people who just left here. And they said, you got to fill out the application. I was like, look, my family are, you know, that we're in dire need of this. I have to get my mom and sisters. I said, I'll give you first month's, last month's, and a security deposit. You know, like I'll give you 5 grand right now to let me move into this. And they said, fill out the application, you know, and so I filled out the application and they pushed it through like within minutes and they were like, it's yours. They handed me the keys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh dude. And so I walked out of there and I took an Uber to a U-Haul place. I rented a U-Haul, 25-foot U-Haul.
Mhm.
And I drove the U-Haul to my mom and sister's apartment. And when I pulled up there, like the sheriff essentially was like putting their stuff on the curb that day.
No way. Wow.
So we packed up all their shit, put it
Mhm.
in this put it in this U-Haul. I left furniture there. I left things there. I was like, you know, I knew that I knew what was happening in my life and they didn't. So they get in the U-Haul with me. All 5 of us were piled in the U-Haul and they're crying, you know, they're scared. They're like, what are we gonna do? You know, I'm just like, oh, we'll figure something out, you know. And the whole time I knew. And you know, we drive out of Canton. We drive, you know, 30 minutes to Akron, Portage Lakes, where we were at. We pull in this driveway, and then we're like, "Where were we?" You know, like, whose house is this? And I pull out the key. I'm like, "This is our house," you know. And I'll like never forget that expression. You know, I'll never forget their faces and just the. I've never seen fear and worry leave someone's body so fast.
Yeah. Yeah. What a weight lifted.
Yeah, man, it was. And so we unloaded the U-Haul truck and we moved into the new house. And at that point, I went seriously hard on the road with Robert. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was his tour schedule was. There was times we were in New York on a Friday and we were in LA on a Saturday. I'm like, who booked this? Like, didn't you realize we got like 5,000 miles in between this? And so, but his tour schedule, he just put out a record, and so he was doing a press run and doing radio and doing stuff in New York and LA and Nashville, and so it was pretty intense. There was a lot of times I fell asleep sitting straight up, just blasted, and we ended up. What kind of led me here was he got an offer to open up for Kid Rock, 6 or 7 shows in Detroit. Little Caesars Arena in Detroit had just opened, and Kid Rock was like the opener for the grand opening kind of thing. Like he started you know what I mean? He cut the red tape kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we we're in Little Caesars Arena, and that's not really Robert's scene either. Robert plays festivals and jam band stuff. Like being in a huge arena opening up for somebody like Kid Rock, all of a sudden the band is super, super far apart. We're used to playing, jam bandy close together. And now I look over and Robert's way over there. The drummer's way behind us. And, so we all get there. And I think all of us were not intimidated, but just like excited to be there. And it was a little out of the element, but, we made it work. And Kid Rock ended up like walking out and hearing me sing. And we're just like, whoa. It's like, he sees me in like the catering line. He's like, "What's up, cousin?" And I'm just like, "Dude, you're Kid Rock, man. Like, what's up with you?" Like, damn. And
Nice.
and so, yeah, he's a great dude. And
So let me ask you, how do you repay kindness like that you receive? Like one minute you're not knowing what's going to happen, and suddenly you're playing in Telluride, and he finds out a little bit about what's going on in your life, and he helps you out. I mean, like I've been in many spots in my life where it's like people have, I needed a helping hand, and um, I always wonder like what other people do in order to, you know, repay that kindness back.
yeah, I don't know, man. I've said thank you to him multiple times, and he just kind of brushes it off, like you don't even want to hear his thank you. He's just like, yeah, I think he just, I ended up being in his band for a couple years,
Yeah.
and I think that he saw something in me that was worth way more than the cash advance he gave me, to help me out. And I think that it was worth that. It was worth giving me that money to help him too. Like I feel like I helped, through those times at that time. I was impactful on his shows too. And I know this because people came up and be like, "Man, I've seen Robert, 3 times. And this is by far the best. You're such a great addition. I'm glad he found you." I'm like, "Oh, wow." And so I knew he recognized that, and he just, I don't know. I don't know what made him do. And really, what's crazy is like I don't know what made him get on Instagram and like how he even found me. I don't know how those algorithms work, man. But
Yeah, who knows?
I,
That's not common as much anymore either. Like you must have like,
yeah.
I mean, you hit the jackpot that day.
Oh, it
Like,
was a lottery, dude. It was a lottery that he just happened to be scrolling, and I popped up on his thing, on his news feed or whatever it was back then. I don't, there was no TikTok, and and so it's like I don't know how he found me, really. I don't really know. I know that I know this. When I posted the video, I lied and said it was in Nashville. Now, it was just a bar. So when you're looking around, it was just a bar. But like in like the hashtags, I put Nashville, Tennessee. The location, I put Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm thinking, I think I asked him one time, but because that you know those hashtags and stuff, it set that algorithm on for him, and maybe he was in Nashville at the time or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's still crazy.
What messages do you personally try to convey in your music?
You know, I really love, trying to make people feel what I feel in their own way. I try to write things that are I try to send a universal enough message that, you know, that even if you are heartbroken, or you just lost this, or you just gained this, no matter where you're at in your life, I try to I try to create a I try to create art that is timeless, and that people, you know what I mean? Like, no matter where you're at on your journey, it makes sense, and it feels, I just want people to feel something when they're listening to me, not just hear it. I want them to feel it, because I felt it when I was writing it.
Yeah.
So I try to translate that, you know.
Well, I can tell you that I feel your music, man. You got some depth to yourself. Not only your lyrics, but your sound in general. It's fantastic. Now, tell our audience a little bit about what they can expect from you coming up, and some of the people that you're working with. I hit a little bit on at the very top of the intro there, but let us know what's happening.
Yeah. So, I'm working with Kid Rock now, and that was, through the Robert Randolph thing. Um, Bob, that's his name. That's what I call him. He's also been really great to me, and I physically, like, really close met him on his cruise ship. Um, I got an invite to go on his cruise, and I get there, and I got artist badges and things like that, and I just kind of worked my way up to, kind of snuck into his, like, VIP party. I just was like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm with them, and I kind of outsmarted the security there, and I got in, and I see a piano, and I see people, playing the piano, and I see Kid Rock and other celebrities there, and musicians. And I just kind of waited, and I watched other people play, and then I sat down on it, and I did my thing. And then all of a sudden I noticed the room was, like, quiet. And Bob's like, shut up, like, telling everybody in the room to shut up. He's drunk, smoking a cigar and stuff. And he's listening to me like, you guys hear this kid? Like, and that was it. That was all it took. And he gave me his phone number. He was like, when you get back to Nashville, call me, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, so I book a flight to Nashville. I text him. I don't even know if he's home. I just text him. He was like, yeah, here's my address. Come by. I'm like,
Sweet.
all right. And I go there, and I end up staying there for like 3 weeks at his house, like eating cereal with him in the morning and shit. and he's like, so what do you want to do here, man? Like, what's, you're so good, you can't be Robert Randolph's backup guy, or, his side guy, your whole life. Like, why don't you, like, what does Robert pay you? I'm like, oh, dude, I don't know what he pays me. He was like, I'll double it. I'm like, what? What do you mean you'll double it? He's like, move to Nashville and be you. I'll double it. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, is this a test? You know, like, is this dude like trying to see if I'm like, you know, all about the money and like, you know. So my heart said, hey, Bob, I got to talk this over with Robert. You know, I, of course, I want to do that, but I got to at least talk to Robert and let him know that, you know, and Bob loved that. He
Yeah.
loved that I didn't just say, oh, yeah, hell, screw Robert. Give me the money. You know, he
Yeah.
loved that my
Loyalty.
loyalty was strong.
Yeah.
And he said that it was a test. It was a
Yeah.
test. And so,
How did Robert handle it when you talked to him about it?
um, he's good. We've played shows since then. When he's needed me, I've kind of filled in. If you know, if it makes sense in my schedule, I'll fly out anytime and jam with him. It's always a great time. Um, but my schedule, the moment that I moved to Nashville, it was another one of those stories where Bob wasn't lying. He doubled what I made, and there was times, you know, I became the house band at his bar here in Nashville, and I made more money than I've ever made in my life. And I moved my whole family down here, my mom, my sisters, dad, my drummer, bass player, other friends that I've known for 20 years that were good songwriters. Like, hey man, you got to come down here. This is I've built up an infrastructure where I think that I can help you. And that's what I've done essentially. I've extended olive branches to everyone. You know, now I have two houses and car
Mhm.
payments and all that stuff. But I, through my connection with Kid Rock, I have met my, you know, idols of mine. You know, and so Zach Brown being one of them. I recently met him and at Kid Rock's house, and you know there was all kinds of people there. Marcus King, another one. He's a great friend and also amazing musician. And I'm there jamming with them and, you know, just high on life. Like, wow, I can't believe this is happening. And Zach Brown, same thing, gives me his phone number and says, I'd love to help you out, man. I'm like, me too. I'd love for you to help me out, you know? And Bob essentially gives his blessing that day. We were all three there and Bob's like, he needs your help, Zach. Come on. And so literally the next day I was in Zach Brown's studio in Nashville, Southern Ground. He was producing a band called King Calloway, another great group of guys down here. They're great friends of mine. We write songs together, and they just released a couple singles, and they're really on their way up as well. Um, I sat in the studio while they were, you know, they're like finalizing and tracking their record with Zach, and he's producing it. And Zach's looking at me like handing me guitars, and he's like, hey, you know, I was like, hey, I can, you know, like I'm playing B3 on some of the recordings, and it was just, I was like, wow, this is nuts, man. And then I ended up going out to a party with Zach Brown that night, and it was Marcus King's album release party. So I walk in there, and it's like an invite only, obviously, kind of party, and and Marcus and people were there, and other, you know, musicians and celebrities and whatnot, and I me and Zach Brown end up like, I think we stayed out till like 2 in the morning that night. You know, not even drinking, just
Mhm.
watching bands and eating chicken wings and like just listening to music he's created in his truck. And and he said the same thing. I think that I'd like to bring you out for some shows, and I think we can write. You come out, we'll write, and we'll do the thing. And I was like, yeah, man, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. And so I wait, and I said, when are you thinking? When are you thinking? You know, you know, and he sends me out a date. He was like, how about this weekend, this run? And I was like, I'm open. I'm open that weekend. Let's do it. And same thing, you know, I get out, I go to a tour bus garage here in Nashville. I take a bus and we end up going to Michigan or somewhere. Can't remember. And I show up and Robert Randolph is his opening act
Mhm.
on that tour.
Yeah.
I'm like, you gotta be shitting me.
Full circle.
And the funniest part, and not the funniest, the weirdest part is that the video that brought me to Robert was a video of me singing a Zach Brown song.
Mhm.
So I told Zach that story. I'm like, dude, you know, Robert brought me to the game. He saw a video of me singing one of your songs in a bar. And then, you know, 5 years later, I meet you and you bring me on the road with you and Robert's there. Like, I'm just like, wow, dude, my life is crazy. You know, like the way this shit works, man, is
Yeah,
nuts.
no doubt. Yeah, man. Um, Social media obviously has been a very important component to your success. Where can fans learn more about you and keep up with your new music and concerts?
And we are I recently signed a publishing and writing contract with Sony, and I've been writing like crazy. You know, like every day that I can, I got to write after this. You know, and
Mhm.
so I'm just looking to maximize my catalog, and then we're going into the studio pretty soon, and just looking at 100 songs, outside songs I've written, and just handpicking what is the best for this release, you know. And I would say I just recently got on the TikTok bandwagon, and it's going to be on there. It's going to be on Instagram, um, and definitely, you know, if people make their way to Nashville, um, I'm still doing, you know, I still have that residency essentially at his bar, Kid Rock's bar, and so they can definitely come there, and I'm always making announcements. Hey, we just wrote this song with Kid Rock. Hey, we just wrote this song with, you know, Uncle Cracker, or whatever, you know. And so it's like, it's, you know, it's definitely, it's easy to keep up with me and people today. My website, deanjamesandthetreatment.com.
That's what I was going to say. You got a website, so you guys can check that out. Go to his website, keep up with all of the haps of what's going on, and get down there to Broadway and go down there and watch him perform. I got a couple questions, and I ask everybody these two questions on my podcast. It's kind of become a, uh, you know, it's final thoughts, but it's also, you know, it's become something that I like to hear these answers, because there's never too many people that have ever asked me questions like this when I get interviewed over the years. And one of them is if you could take a ride in the Jacob Young time machine, imagine I have a time machine, and you go back to Canton, Ohio, what advice would you give to young Dean James Jr.?
Hmm. You know, I've thought about that, and before, and you know, it's hard for me to think about what I would, what and if I would do anything different. And you know, I wonder if I went back and I said, "Hey, this heartbreak you're feeling now, or this loneliness and this fear you're feeling now, you know, and abandonment, and you know, it's all part of the process for you. And one day you're going to be playing in front of 30,000 people with Zach Brown." I would be afraid that a young version of me would maybe not, um, kind of, you know, take the same course, and then I might not end up where I might not have ended up where I am now, you know. And so I would, but you know, I would definitely want to tell myself that it's, you know, you're not alone. like that, right. I'm not a super religious person. I was never taught religion or even shown it. But I have to think that these coincidences in my life are like they feel like it feels like a joke, like the lottery. It feels like, how can these things happen to me? Like, how did I grow up the way I grew up, surrounded by drug addicts and people that and domestic violence and all this like chaos? And how did I didn't even graduate high school? Like, how did I make it out of there? And not just make it out of there, I did exactly what I said I was going to do since I was in the first grade.
Mm.
When I was in the first grade, they're like, "What do you want to do?" And these kids are like, "I want to be a policeman, this or that." I'm like, "I want to be a rock star, man. I want to be a singer and a musician, and I want to play for people and entertain people." And I've managed to do exactly through all of those struggles, and all the crazy shit that I've been through and seen, that I've been able to overcome that, and get here. So I have to believe that there is, maybe not like a higher power, but like there's like a path, and it feels like it's already been chosen for me. And it just manifests because I never gave up.
Yeah.
you know
You just said something I was thinking. Manifestation it's so important. You were doing it since the first grade. And,
yeah,
eh, I don't think a lot of people realize just how powerful that is. If you believe that you can do something, you will set your mind to do it, and the cards will fall in the places that they're supposed to.
yeah, yeah. It's a crazy, like, powerful thing. And I was set up for failure. I was dealt a hand that you should not have. I should have lost. You know what I mean? Like, that's a game I should have lost. I was set up to lose. Um, but then again, I was given tools that essentially I was able to, even with a shitty hand, bluff my way and win the game, kind of thing, with the tools that I was given. And I don't know, man. I feel blessed.
Yeah. My last question, Boys Town, my sponsor, and I work pretty closely with them with a lot of different things. And I've spent time with some of the kids that have, been out of the family homes that are there. Some tragic stories and whatnot, but their motto is, "He ain't heavy, he's my brother."
Oh yeah.
And it started a long time ago, turn of the century, when they didn't have all the right medical equipment for all the kids, but they were taking kids off the streets. Kids were showing up from trains, and families just during the Great Depression. One of the kids, they didn't have a wheelchair or a way to get him around, so the boys would take turns carrying him to sporting events and to class. And Father Flanagan said to one of the boys one time, he goes, "Isn't he heavy?" He said, "He's not heavy, Father. He's my brother."
Wow.
Meaning, in our lives, I've had people carry me.
Hmm.
Who's carried you?
Um, Definitely. My drummer, Ben Stover. He's an amazing drummer. I think his Instagram is like Ben John Drums or something like that. But I met him when I was probably 13 or 14, and he's like a year older than me, so he's like in the grade above me. But right from the get go, he was there for me, you know, in more ways than I can even remember. As far as definitely, carried me through relationships and carried me, just the older brother that I never had. And, and then my mom's, in addition to Ben, my mom's brother. So it's my uncle. He stepped in at a time and kind of essentially like adopted me. And really, I had all the creativity and I had all of the imagination and I had all of the tools, but I didn't have the discipline. And he was a very workaholic, disciplined, um, you know, um, old school dude, tough dude, and truck driver, owned car dealerships, and jack of all trades. But he was, without him, without him and Ben, that's more than anything, I do not think that I would be where I'm at today, and it's just, I don't know. I do think about it, obviously, and I talk to my uncle. He's still back in Ohio. I talk to him every week probably, but he never gave me anything easy. He never gave me anything for free. Even though I grew up the way that I did, back then I was like, I got nothing. He's an asshole, man. Like making me like work like a dog just for peanuts and kind of thing. And back then I didn't appreciate the way that he treated me or the way that he, but now I really do. Now I really do. I look back and I'm like, man, those lessons are irreplaceable. There's no amount of money that can replicate or replace the lessons that I've learned from my uncle on how to navigate through life, and as with through discipline and hard work and accountability and loyalty and all, so many things that, because my parents weren't there. They were there. They let me play my guitar as loud as I wanted, but that was it. They didn't give me the building blocks on how to be successful and and thrive in this world, that especially the one that I'm in now. I got to be on time for things, and I gotta wake up and do it. I'm my own boss, and I have my own company and my own LLC, and without like the gifts of all these learning experiences from my uncle, I don't think I'd be here, even with all the talent.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, man.
And buddy, thank you for joining me today. You've already made such a name for yourself in the music industry, and it's really only the beginning. And I know you have a lot more stories to tell musically. And I'm going to be the first one streaming it, buying a ticket to come see you wherever I can. So
right on, man.
You keep it going, brother.
Yeah, brother. Thank you.
All right, hold tight for me. That's about all the time that we have for this week, but the Boys Town toll-free national hotline, 1-800-448-3000, is a 24/7 crisis resource referral number for kids and their parents. And they're always there to help anyone having suicidal thoughts, risking any type of self-harm, parenting problems, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, anxiety, anger problems, school problems like bullying and peer pressure, or chemical dependency. If you're suffering with any of these issues, or you just need to talk to someone, they're there for you 24/7. Voice to 20121. Someone will get back to you immediately. Boys Town, saving children, healing families. Till next time, love each other and love yourselves.